Hey, yeah, thank you everyone for joining in. So, my name is Adam Kinder. I'm one of the co-founders at Gathered and Found, also, yeah, co-creator of the Leaders and Founders podcast, which this session will be going live on. So today, yeah, we've got Julien Levine de Cadet, which is probably one of my favorite names to say in the UK right now, definitely. We've known each other for a little while, actually, kind of on and off, I guess. We've spoken about, yeah, trying to get a couple of events kind of booked in the past, I guess, but it hasn't really quite worked out timing wise. So, yeah, really glad. Well, I say really glad this opportunity came up. The discussion is around COVID, which nobody's pleased that it turned up, but obviously we've got some great stuff to talk about. So, yeah, I'm never really good with intros. So, yeah, if you want to give us a bit of background just on yourself, and then we can, yeah, talk about some of the cool stuff you've been doing.
Yeah, of course. So thank you, Adam. Like, I'm very keen to be here. So my name is Julien. I'm currently VP of Engineering at a company called ZOE. ZOE is a small startup in London that is in the healthcare space. Basically, we spent the last 2 years to do studies on nutrition. And what we're trying to do as a company is predict how you will respond to food. So what we did is find out that different people actually react very differently to the same meal, and that's what we've been doing for the last 2 years. And that's in that context actually that we ended up working with a lot of researcher universities, and especially KCLs and Queen's UK on various studies. And Twins UK is basically where we ended up working on the COVID-19 related stuff. So Twins UK is quite an interesting entity. It's basically a registry of twins in the UK. That's the biggest one in the UK and the most clinically detailed in the world. So those people are super interesting because basically they've done dozens of studies, and for the stuff we're doing on nutrition, it was also quite interesting because one of the things we wanted to do at the time is find out whether genetics is a strong factor in how you respond to food. So that's how we ended up working with those people, and with Tim Spector, which is actually a co-founder of our company. And that's why also we ended up working on the COVID-19 initially with them.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think it's so just in terms of your kind of transition to ZOE as well, because prior to this, you worked sort of 4 years with leading sort of hedge fund and R&D trading companies. So the transition, I imagine, from that world, which is completely different to food and nutrition, is they're very far apart, I suppose. What was the kind of was it what was the kind of motivation behind that? What was it about ZOE as a business, which, because they look like a really really interesting company, up and coming. Obviously they've got really good funding, of course. Is it George as well, one of your sort of co-founders? Is he was CEO of House Trips. You've got a really good leadership team.
Yeah, correct. So indeed, so when I spent the last 4 years before that working for a hedge fund in London, very secretive, but actually one of the most successful one. It was like 4 years that were really amazing. I spent time on the data platform, leading teams there, and for a hedge fund that are doing quantitative research. Data is basically everything. So that was like super core to the business. But I also reached a point where it wasn't clear to me what was going to happen next from a career perspective. So started to wonder what I wanted to do next, and really part of that was something that was maybe a bit more meaningful in terms of mission than just making someone that was very rich even richer. So I had like a great time in that hedge fund, but I really wanted to work on something where I could go back home at night and explain that to my kids and say this is the stuff that we're doing, and it matters not just for me at the end of the month, but for all of those people. So ZOE is quite interesting on that front because nutrition is it's a very interesting field. All of us are eating every day, and actually, when you get into that field, you realize that we know very little about food. We know really very little about what is good food, what is bad food, how people respond to it. So that's how I ended up there. I also knew one of the founders. So you mentioned George at Georgiou. But there's also Jonathan Wolf, which is ex-Criteo like me. Criteo is a big ad tech success story in Paris. So I knew the people, and basically started talking, and I was just very excited by all the people kind of gravitating around the company, all like the quality research from KCL, Harvard, Stanford, MGH, all of that. Like really felt like it was like the right team to tackle a very, very complicated problem. So that's how I ended up there.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's always interesting, I think when you've been somewhere for quite a long time, regardless of which industry it is, where, or, even if it's tech and non-tech, you have to really buy into that vision. And I think as a leader as well, the people that we speak with on a daily basis, you have to want to be there. I think, it's pretty hard to take a leadership role, unless it is, crazy position, which you just have to sort of try, you really need to buy into that vision. And I think, I guess with what you've sort of been doing now, I mean, just to talk us through, when you landed with ZOE, obviously you weren't looking at a COVID tracker, right? So, how does it look now compared to when you first joined, in terms of the focus and, how your work has changed, I guess?
Yeah, so I think you're right. Like ZOE was not planning to do anything with COVID, like anybody else. But we ended up what our founder Tim Spector, which is also director of Twins UK, asked us, could you do something for us? Could you build an app? And say, oh yeah, we think we can do that. And that was a bit more than months ago. And you're absolutely right. Like the focus totally changed the last month. So before that, we were really focused on building a product around nutrition. We started this project, which was like just a few people, 6 people initially, kind of hackathon style, and the success was like instantaneous. So we went from 6 people working, Thursday, Friday, hackathon style, a bit more than a bit over the weekend. Monday we started scaling because even though we didn't have any users, we realized that we were missing a few skills in terms of building some kind of website, things like that. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, at the end of Wednesday, we had like 1 million people. So at that point, basically, the whole company shifted to supporting this initiative. So now we're kind of rebalancing towards our core product, but there are still a lot of people. So in terms of engineering team, for example, we still have 80% of the engineering team basically supporting the COVID Symptom Tracker. It's not entirely clear how we'll be able to, go back to, kind of inverting the balance between our core product and COVID Symptom Tracker, because it's just so important. Like the data, the insights that we're getting are extremely valuable. So we keep pushing on that. For other part of the company, thankfully, it's a bit better. So like for the first few days, few weeks, like we had so many emails that we've, tasked 10 people to actually go through the inbox, reply to everybody. Now that part is a bit behind us, mostly because also a lot of people were having issues that have been solved since. But that's still like, very, very significant project for the company for sure. So very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, just to kind of take us back then. So you're, working at a sort of, health science business, focus around that. You obviously have really good support from, the research world, of course, high level of academia. So it's interesting stuff you're doing anyway. So for you, as the VP of engineering, you get that kind of question, because we've seen, and I'm sure everybody here knows a lot of people that, have really tried to help, I guess. We've seen loads of different sort of hackathons to try and build apps that are going to help people. So I think, as a kind of a message of positivity, there's been so much collaboration that we haven't really seen before, I think. And there's that genuine wanting of, people, they just want to help out, they want to be able to help people in need. And obviously this is, I mean, I know we were speaking before, it's hard to get the exact numbers, but you're pretty confident it's the fastest downloaded app to 1 million in the UK, there or thereabouts?
So we've got more than 2.5 million users right now. So that's at least that number of downloads. So I don't have any stat, but I suspect in terms of growth, that's probably one of the biggest growths in the UK ever. Like, going from 0 to 1 million in 36 hours is probably quite unique. But I could be wrong because that's not my area of expertise.
No, I think you're definitely correct. Maybe apart from something like a World Cup app, perhaps. But yeah, I think 100%, with regards to, to the pace of downloads in such a short space of time. And, I think as well, in terms of just, I guess, the brand, everyone, my wife, who knows nothing about tech, doesn't really use her mobile apart from sort of messages. Everyone has seen the app. I think a lot of people, a huge amount of people that I know. So what was the kind of first thing that you had to do? You've been asked to build this sort of symptom tracker, which I'm sure yourself and I'm sure everybody in the team were really keen to get behind. I guess it's like a brand new greenfield project. Let's get involved. Let's build something up. How did you? I assume there's stuff already sort of ongoing, right? You know, with your core business that you were still working on. How did you sort of essentially set the team up to go ahead? What was the strategy? And it was obviously super quick, like, you know, special forces response times, I guess. But just talk us through that process a little.
Yeah, I think that's that's kind of exactly what you're describing, in the sense that it's very funny because like in the morning where I start working on that thing, basically I email my CEO, Jonathan Wolf, and I tell him, there's that stuff happening in France. I'm French myself, and there are those people that we know very well, ex-Criteo, that are doing those apps, and they're having like lots of success helping the hospitals. So I email him that stuff. And he get back to me like an hour later and say, "That's funny that you're talking about that, because I was just talking to Tim, and we think we can do something about that, but we didn't know exactly what that was going to be, because it was like really finger in the air, like nothing concrete." So we say, let's talk to your guys, find out if anyone would be interested in volunteering for like a super quick sprint on building something, like building an app, but we didn't even know what that app would be. So at that point we just have like normal team sync, and then I just ask people who would be interested in helping on that front, and basically everybody say, yeah, of course. We won't. It's like week 1 or 2, I don't remember, of the lockdown. It's on everybody's mind. So everybody is like, of course we want to help. So just get a bunch of volunteers. At that point, the challenge for me is more like, okay, we don't really know what we're going to do yet. What's the app should be doing? We've got those ongoing projects. At that point, it's it's just an idea. So it's really trying to extract the people for a couple of days from whatever is the least important priority for us. But anyway, we assembled that team, like a mix of skills from mobile and backend, UX designer. We've got a call with the team from KCL. And then literally we just get started. Like, you forget everything you do generally when you've got your project, that are supposed to last like a month or 3 months or whatever. You literally just say, okay, what is the quickest path for us to get something out? And, you start building an app, even though you're not even sure what that's going to be, but you start creating the shell of it, just because that ultimately you need that very minimal stuff to be able to release. You start talking more in details to the science teams to get more details on the concept, on the questions. You start setting up some kind of backend, which again is totally empty at the beginning, but just need to get like the bare minimal up and running. And at the same time that you're doing that, basically things start to clarify. And the thing that is very interesting is that you focus like crazy. You don't try to overdo whatever. You don't think about the color of your button. You just do whatever is the strict minimum that gets you closer to being able to release. So that's a great exercise in prioritizing. Basically, you forget everything that doesn't matter. And I think especially when you think that it's about COVID-19. So at that point, people are very, very aware that we're talking about people's life, right? So their priority totally shift. Like you don't have great debate about what is the right way to do X, Y, Z anymore in the engineering team. It's just, let's do something. We'll figure out later if that thing was the best we could do. It's just ship at all costs. So that's basically what we did for the next 36 hours. We had a deadline in our head, which is we wanted to have a version of the app that was kind of functional for the App Store review process. Which is something that we kind of discovered and is quite interesting. Generally when you build an app, you're not too worried about whether Google or Apple is going to approve your app. It's going to take a bit of time, but that's okay. Well, it turns out that if you build a COVID-19 app, they're actually looking at that very, very closely, one. Two, they're impacted the same way than we are. So basically they're totally understaffed. And the whole review process that is supposed to take 1 day, 2 days, now they advertise could take more than a week. So we actually had to spend a lot of time over the weekend reaching out to every single person in our network to try to basically speed that up in whatever way possible. So that's why we wanted to have something as quickly as possible on the Friday, because quickly it became clear that the bottleneck would not even be us creating the app. The bottleneck would be someone pressing a button somewhere to say, yes, that app can be used by people. But then thankfully that happened quite rapidly in the end. At the end of Monday afternoon, we had a version approved on the App Store. So we basically use all that time while those conversations were happening to kind of iterate, make the app a bit better. But we really something on the next day that was like lacking a lot of feature. So that was very interesting.
Yeah, no, of course. And I mean, how many times has sort of everyone here, I guess, been working on a product that probably it should have been released a long time ago, but you're obviously still working on it, trying to get everything right. And I think there's an interesting quote I heard from Mike Kelly, who's the CEO of Carl, a fintech company. He was like, look, if you have an idea, just ship it, build it, get a sort of an MVP together, try and get something out, put it into production, then you can tweak it, because if you don't get it out, you'll never know. And that's obviously a completely different thing to an extent here, in the sense that this was going out to genuinely really help people. Were you quite surprised, I guess, with the success and the amount of downloads, the response you got?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, we started that app to do, basically we're targeting only the people from Twins UK, so 15,000 people initially. It's only during the weekend on Monday that we decided with KCL that actually a lot of other people, we could benefit from having data from a lot of other people. So when we launched it the next day, I mean, Tim Spector is quite a well-known figure in the industry. So he had access to a few media to kind of advertise it. But the funny thing is that he was supposed to announce it on BBC4 Radio, something at 8 a.m. the next day in the morning, and it basically canceled literally 5 minutes before. So we were all like, not depressed. We were like, oh, that's sad. But, you still start tweeting about it. And then, you open Google Analytics and you say, oh, okay, there are 100 people on the website. Well, that's nice. And then, an hour later, there's like 1,000 people on the website. And like, oh, yeah, that's starting to take a bit. And then, as the day passed, it increased. And the next day was basically entirely crazy, because what happened is that on the Tuesday, it kind of built up in the community. And at that point, basically every single media started picking up the story, but they just needed enough hours to actually write something about it. So basically everything was released the next day at the same time. And like at 7:55 in the morning, we already had like more than 15,000 people on the website. The database kind of blew up because we were just having like thousands of registrations a minute. So it's been totally unexpected. Like I think all of us were like, when we started that thing, if we've got 10, 15,000 people at the end of the day, we're happy. At the end of the first day, we had 200,000. At the end of the second day, we had this million. So that was really, really unexpected.
Sure. Yeah. I suppose you can't really predict those kind of numbers, and yeah, it's great to obviously get that feedback that it's like, loads of people are actually using what we built here. You mentioned around I guess this kind of overload with data, registrations, all these kind of things, which obviously a lot of people. There's so many people trying to get onto the platform at one time, because I think it's, probably in most people's lives, I guess, apart from, people like Captain Tom, for example, who's been around for a long time and seen a lot of stuff. I think for this kind of generation, it's probably the first time that a lot of people I've probably been scared, to be honest with you. I've got 2 young children myself, a lot of people with kids, I've got, my father's a little bit at risk. So everyone feels it in some way. And I think the fact that so many people wanted to sign up, it must feel great. You've actually built something which has actually genuinely helped. And as you said, with the registration, the overload, what was it like? Did you have problems getting people, registered and onto the app, or did the system handle it pretty well through that?
So I think we had lots of different problems. So obviously, as I said on the Wednesday morning, just we couldn't handle the load. We went, with our big guns, basically. Thankfully, we were all, cloud hosted. So we just picked the biggest instances that we could, just as a quick fix, like, did not even try to change the code, just basically, can you get a bigger database, which actually saved us and restored the service almost instantly. And then it's only in the next kind of, few days that we actually try to really improve the scalability. But really, the first day was actually the biggest in terms of traffic by very far. So far we've been kind of closely monitoring it, and there's been a few events where there was again a bit more sharing, but actually nothing like the first day. But the biggest problem that we had really is we really released an app that kind of was functional, but had like a lot of usability issue. I mean, you don't basically build an app for 1 million people in 4 days normally. So one of the things that was very interesting is we just didn't have time to do any password reset in those 4 or 5 days. Like, that sounds like a stupid thing, but we're like, that's not a problem, right? People register, fine, they're logged in, and that's fine. Actually, there was a massive problem. Okay. Like, this was the most needed feature of everything, basically. We had like literally hundreds, if not thousands, of emails on the first day of people that was like, I can't reset my password, your app sucks, whatever, blah, 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 please help me. And the reviews were just terrible. Like, we were smashed. So we still had a lot of people kind of, downloading the app. But there was this kind of strong focus on a few specific areas, and we just didn't think that this one would actually be the biggest one. If I had to bet, I would have bet on plenty of other things. I would have bet on accessibility issues, on the app not working on some specific devices. But no, password reset was really one of the most important things. So that's really the kind of problem that we had for the first few weeks. It was actually less about scalability. It was a lot more about plenty of things that really needed to have a bit of developer time, added some features and things like that. Another one that was interesting is that actually some people could not make the difference between the login and register screen. So we had a lot of people that were like, I cannot log in on your app. And when you talk to them, they're like, of course you can't. You're on the register screen. So it's all problem on our side, right? That means the UX is not good. But what we find out is that when you build an app for a few thousand people, if it's good enough, you're probably not going to have that many issues. When you've got 1 million people, basically every single edge case is suddenly 10,000 people emailing you, because this edge case, if it's 1% of the people, well, 1% is suddenly 10,000 people that are very unhappy with something. So that totally changed, how you prioritize stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, if you look at, if you look at most apps, unless it's a very kind of well-known business who are relaunching an app or something like this, most startups, I guess, and companies who are still kind of on that trajectory and still growing, they have apps, and they obviously find their user base of people who are really interested in that thing. So, I imagine with ZOE, you're kind of the first users you're going to get are people that are really passionate about nutrition, passionate about health, wellness, wanting to better themselves, et cetera, and yeah, you generally add to an app and you evolve it over time, and then by the time that you have 1 million users, normally you've probably sculpted it into what is pretty close to the finished article. Whereas yeah, I mean, you've basically just thrown yourselves to the public, kind of feeding the business to the lions, I guess, for everybody to kind of chip in. And yeah, I guess so just in terms of the actual impact that the app has had. So you mentioned as well, so reached 1 million in like 36 hours or so, over 2.5 million now. What are you doing with the data in terms of, where that's going, how the app is actually helping? Where does that feed back to? That feeds back to the researchers? Yeah,
so that's actually the most interesting part, because fundamentally the numbers of users that we have, like that's a vanity metric. The data basically now feeds into various places. So it feeds through something called Health Data Research UK, which basically distributed to every single NHS entity, NHS-related entity, and authorities. Basically, that's one of the big thing. We send it obviously directly to KCL. We send it to quite a few partners. So we've got the US version of the app where the data goes to the Massachusetts General Hospital. So there's basically quite a few places, and our data is basically consumed now directly by the government for various things. We also publish some of our own analysis on our website, so covin.joinzoe.com/data. And especially the things we've been focusing on is, what is the actual spread of the virus? What we realize actually quite rapidly with the data that we are collecting is that we basically lead the kind of official indicators by about 2 weeks. So, there's, numbers of deaths is basically the last one, but it takes quite a lot of time for people to go from, contracting the virus to having symptoms to sadly, ending up in an hospital and worse. Whereas we're very, very early indicators of where the load could be. So it's even earlier indicator, for example, than calls on the 111 or on the NHS directly. So we realize that we've got data that basically is very valuable on that front. That's basically one of the reasons that there is actually quite a few various entities are using our data now to predict the load on their local hospitals and things like that. So we also have NHS Wales and NHS Scotland are directly consuming the feed. So that's quite exciting. And then obviously the big thing is that the research teams at KCL and a few other places are now writing paper after paper, doing analysis after analysis on the data they've collected. So they find out that anosmia is one of the biggest symptoms. Anosmia is basically the loss of smell and taste. So they've got very strong data to back that up. They think there is another paper that is being published right now on various medications that we think make you more prone to have like severe symptoms, and just a lot going on. So there are a lot of people at KCL just working on that data and trying to understand a bit better the virus.
Yeah, of course. And I think, from the research perspective, researchers would virtually kill for that amount of data, I suppose, right? So for them, it makes their life so much easier. And I mean, just to kind of, just to kind of go off on a slightly different sort of route, I guess, it's been a really challenging time for everyone, right? COVID has affected so many businesses, local especially have been hit super hard. Every country's in a different place. I remember, so Tom and I, the business partner who's on the call, I remember us speaking and we were looking at the data coming in from Italy, obviously, who kind of led it, unfortunately, at the time. And, very naively, we were thinking, cool, like, what's going on in Italy? What's wrong with essentially the infrastructure? Like, what is happening? And as you said, that delay, it was just a delay, right? So then it hit every single country. But, through this sort of period, again, from our position, we're privileged to be able to coach and advise some great leaders, some great businesses. From where ZOE were, because a lot of companies have obviously had to make pretty big cuts. There's a lot of furlough which has happened. What, I guess, has enabled ZOE to do this? Because there's not a huge amount of businesses, I guess, where they could have actually said, do you know what? Yeah, let's just do this thing. It's going to be great for us in terms of data, of course. And, as a side point, not that this would have ever been the primary objective, but from a brand perspective, a huge amount of press, obviously, for ZOE, of course, which is great, for a good cause. But is it, just the good investment that you've got, good funding, fairly cash rich, which has allowed you to do that? Because a lot of companies wouldn't have had that pleasure, I suppose.
I think that's a mix of things. I think we are definitely well funded, and therefore, when we started working on that thing, that was not too much a worry. Now, if I'm very, very honest too, when we started working on that thing, initially that was just small scale, right? No one kind of, predicted that it would become something that would occupy, 20 people a month later. A bit less now, but that was just not foreseen. So funding was definitely not a big problem, not something we're worried about. I think one of the main reasons we did it is because in many ways, we had the perfect set of skills to actually tackle that problem. Yeah. And that's quite interesting because obviously there was a challenge of building an app and scaling it in a matter of small days. But actually one of the biggest challenges is about data privacy, about data sharing agreements, which happened to be something that we've been dealing with for the last 2 years. Then there is being able to do data science and basically export the data to partners, which happened to be something that we've done for the last 2 years too. So we basically had a lot of quite unique skill and still kind of the startup mentality, which meant that we're like, we're just going to build something, right? It's not like we don't need to get approval from whatever and redirect 30 people to the project. We're just going to do something about it and and try to help. And I think that the last thing is really, exactly that, trying to help, which is like everybody else, we've been impacted by COVID. And I think, everybody was really not in a great mood at the time. Like it was just depressing time. And in some way, at least for the people that were involved on that, there was just like some kind of massive rallying call, right? We're just like suddenly, you're like thinking about, the outside world, and it's just depressing, to, okay, hold on. We can, fight back. We can, in some small degree, take back control and just, do something about it. And that was like just super exciting for, all the people that were involved on that. And I think that's one of the, I was asked like 2 weeks ago, something like that, about, what I was thinking about the pandemic and et cetera. I was like, I have no idea. I just spent the last 3 weeks just, working 18 hours per day on that thing. I have not watched the news. Like, I know what I'm doing as an impact, but, I have no opinion about anything that is happening on the outside world, because I don't. I'm just on the trench trying to do something about it, not thinking about the wider picture. So I think that's the three things that basically led to where we are today. This kind of funding, not a big problem, set of skills, and just the desire to want to do something about it because we felt we could. Like obviously we not just started something for the sake of starting something, but just felt like we have this set of skills that could be useful to people. We have the trust of these universities or research centers. Let's try. If nothing happens, that's all right. We'll move on and do something else.
Yeah, no, of course. 18 hour days, it's like being back in a hedge fund, I guess. No, I'm sure it wasn't that bad. I was going to say, just as a bit of a warning for everyone who's kind of logging in live, if you've got questions, if you could just start to fire them through on the chat bar, that would be great, just so we can sort of get those ready and get them out in a good manner. So look, you've had obviously great success, big shift, and you've genuinely built an app which has really, really helped, the whole of the UK. As you said, getting endorsed by NHS Scotland is huge, to get recognised by a body like that. What does the future look like, I guess? Because I'm sure it's a huge accolade for you and your team, of course, to be able to get something that was that scalable, and actually handled all of that pressure. How many times have you seen apps that you just can't download, right? And it's a pain. So, it's a huge, just a massive kind of well done to you guys and the team. So there's now, I imagine, there's probably some really good feeling, I guess, right, in the team, a lot of confidence in the ability, and you've got good guys. What is the next kind of, through lockdown, I guess, COVID, but beyond that as well? Has there been a bit of a shift? Where are you currently at?
No, you're absolutely right. So I think, the first point indeed is, I think we've proven to ourselves that we could do something like that. And, that indeed gives like a massive boost in self-confidence. I mean, at the same time, also aware that, there's a lot of things that we didn't do well, but that's the beauty of it, which is, it's in many ways that's super condensed learning, right? It's you do in 1 month what generally would take you 1 year, 2 years to build for any other product. So there's so much you can learn and basically we apply to other things. I think that's we started doing that, and we need to do a lot more because there's definitely plenty of things we could have done differently, better. But that's really exciting. So I guess for us, the future is that in the short term we'll still supporting the COVID Symptom Tracker app. We're actually going to launch in Sweden very, very soon because we've got some partners there that are just been extremely keen. So we're working on that right now, and hopefully in the next few days that should be live. We have no idea if that will have the same degree of success, but certainly there's a few partners like that we're working with to try to see if we can launch it in their country. But then, as you said, hopefully at some point, that thing will start being a bit behind us. Or hypothesis, and we could be entirely wrong, is that when the lockdown is kind of released a bit, then suddenly the app will become even more important. And we think, especially in terms of data science, we'll probably have to do quite a bit of work, because that's at that point that we'll probably start seeing the symptoms spreading again. But that's very unknown. And then beyond that, for us, it's basically going back to what we were supposed to do initially, which is we had this target in mind to launch our product by the summer. So we have a bit of delay, but it's basically, switching back to that because, at the end of the day, we're pre-revenue, so we need to launch something, even though we've got quite a bit of funding. So it's really trying to build that product around nutrition that we think people will really, really like. And yeah, trying to really give them, those insights about their metabolism, about, how to improve, their food intake and be a lot healthier. And that's actually quite the interesting link with what we did with COVID and why we're not too worried. One of the main reason for people being very, very sick with COVID is actually having diabetes or a cardiovascular disease, which is exactly the kind of thing we're trying to prevent with our core product in the first place. So we think, ultimately there will be link between those things, and that makes us, quite happy.
Yeah, no, I was going to say just around kind of moving forwards. So there's a question from Matthew Batchelor, which ties in really nicely, I think, to the kind of ending of what you just mentioned there. So so Matthew asked, how will the current experience around shipping products quickly shape your process going forward?
Yeah, so that's a great question because I think back to the point I was saying, we had this kind of extremely condensed learning. And the good thing about having funding is that you're not too worried about your future. The bad thing is that actually for a startup, if you have too much funding, in many ways, you start not being pressed enough in some ways. And I think that kind of resetted our view. And in the past, certainly we were massively polishing everything we were doing. And by doing, that work, we realized that actually it doesn't matter that much, or at least, the thing that matters is definitely not the one that you think will matter. So I think that's, the key, one of the key learning at the company level is really just, ship, something that you're not really proud of, but just, see what happens. And we can already see that, that kind of change already in terms of behavior. Like, we don't have those great debates anymore about whether the button should be blue or red. It's just, let's ship with a button. That's good enough. We'll find out if we need to change the color later. And the other thing that is kind of not necessarily like a new learning for me, but I think that's something that was reinforced at the company level is we were able to ship that thing because we were extremely focused and basically killed everything else while that was happening, because there was just no other way we could do anything else in parallel. But this strong focus means that you go a lot faster because suddenly, all your dependency are a lot easier to manage. Like you don't have, 5 people working on 5 things in parallel, and then, one is blocked on the other, but they're all trying to optimize for different things. Now it's basically you're all in the same boat. You have that thing, and it's a lot easier to manage. So managing work in progress is the other thing from a product perspective, from going fast, that is really, really important. Just doing less things and just going very, very fast about getting feedback and just iterating instead of building your big plan for the next 3 or 6 months.
Yeah. What are the just across the team in terms of the first few people that worked on it, and you set up to around 20? What was the level of experience? Were there some junior engineers in there? Because I guess for junior engineers coming in, first couple of years perhaps in industry, getting something like that, I imagine, if we were out of lockdown, maybe a couple of beers down the pub, I just built like a 2.5 million downloaded app, guys. How about you? So has it been, do you think it's been really good for the confidence of the team and helped them potentially, with their career moving forward?
Yeah, and I mean, totally. I think, as I said, I think for everybody involved, whether you were junior or senior, actually, that's been an extremely condensed, learning experience. And yeah, we do have some junior engineer in the team, and they were exposed to stuff that they would never be otherwise. Like at some point, it's basically, if you've got time, and you've got a junior engineer, you're probably going to, help him to get the stuff done and make sure that everything is right. But when you're just battling fire after fire, it's basically, here is the problem, deal with it, call me if something goes wrong, but otherwise I really don't have time to look at it myself. And that totally changed the kind of relationship. So you're kind of totally forced to delegate almost everything you can and really focus on the one thing where you can make a big difference. So basically everybody kind of, below you has to stand up and, and make things happen on their own. So that's definitely what happened. The perfect example was the example about the database. Like we were down, and we have this very quick conversation. We say, let's just pump the database. And, actually one of our junior engineers decided to go with the biggest one that we could. That was fine. That was the right call. I was like, yeah, fine. We'll figure out the money after, because worst case scenario, in a few days, we'll scale down if that's an issue. So that's, this kind of responsibility that people took, and just say, yeah, let's get the service back online first, not trying to optimize for something that is secondary, such as, cost. That's not what we want to do in the short term. So people were I think, quite excited by that, and lots of learning, and still a lot to do, definitely.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, we've got another question from Tom here. So yeah, so producing something like this so quickly, what was the process with regards to security? In terms of the user data, the information, how did you set that up? Because I guess, security should be front of mind with a lot of things. I guess it was obviously going to be relevant naturally when you start receiving so much data. So how did you approach that? What was the kind of process for you guys?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because indeed, that's the one thing on which we did not compromise. Like basically, I didn't want to be on headline of the news with, hey, data breach, 1 million records for whatever, end up somewhere in the dark web. We did a lot of things. Thankfully, I come from a hedge fund that has some actually quite crazy security practice in many ways, but at least that gave me exposure to quite a lot of things. But in terms of security, the starting point is doing some kind of threat modeling analysis, is finding out, what are the main ways that people could actually try to hack into your system, or basically cause your harm. And in many ways, actually, the cloud makes at the same time the situation worse and actually a lot easier. It's worse because basically, if something is open, it's open to everybody. There is not necessarily very, very good perimeter around it. But it's a lot better because actually there's a lot of very mature security tools. So for us, there was like plenty of things, but the biggest one was really just making sure that the data we collect cannot end up anywhere. So there is standard security practice around making sure, for example, your database can't be reached from outside your cloud provider and your kind of project. That's the first thing. There was making sure that the endpoint that you're using to communicate with the app are secured, so that means being authorized to talk to them. And one of the most important thing actually that we did initially is that we decided that the app would be almost only write-only. You cannot get data back from the app, or very, very little. So that basically remove a lot of potential issues, such as bug in your code where suddenly you can access the data from someone else. But in our case, there was literally no endpoint to actually get the data. And then we started collaborating with quite a few companies that quickly, when they saw the success, kind of, decided to help us. So we did some penetration testing, which is like probably very rare for a project that is basically 3 years old. So penetration testing is basically people trying to hack into your system on purpose. Like you sign a contract with them to say, yes, you have the right to do that. Obviously, we asked them to do that on our staging environment, our production environment, so that even if they could manage to do it, they could not access data. But thankfully, they could not, which was a good thing. They still made some recommendations about various things we could improve. We set up various solutions to protect against other common ways to hack into your system. Some of them are called like SQL injection. So that's basically a way to insert code in your own application by calling the endpoints. So all of that stuff basically we started doing. We started protecting against brute force logging intent. So one of the things we quickly find out is, when you've got 10,000 people, nobody care about you. When you've got 2.5 million people, well, by definitions, some of the people are reusing their password. So basically that are going to be compromised, and there's nothing you can do about it because their own account have been compromised on different other websites in the past. But then some people are basically also going to try to attack your system by just trying, various combinations of password and weak password. Yeah. So we also set up, some protection against that, and quite a few other things. So basically, security was really top of our mind at every time. security is never, you're never 100% safe, but that's one thing on which we keep iterating, every week since then. Just add another layer, and apply principles called defense in depth, so that if you got one problem at one layer, you still have several layers of protection behind. So that's what we do.
Sure. No, definitely. Yeah. And I'm sure, I guess moving forward, just as a quick heads up, this is really exciting for everyone who's listening and watching. In true startup fashion, my laptop is 2%, so I have to run very quickly to grab it and come back. But just whilst I am away from the chat, just in terms of what it's taught you, I guess, as a leader, how you're going to approach things moving forwards. And I've got another question from Paul that I'll come back to shortly. But what have you learned? What are kind of some of the key things that you're gonna take forwards? And I'm gonna do a Usain Bolt and be back in 2 secs to catch the end. Okay.
Yeah, no worry. I think some of the stuff I mentioned before, and some of those kind of I knew but I'd forgotten. But managing work in progress, I think is very important. The other thing is that this project internally was very successful because it was very obvious to everyone why we were doing it, and it's very easy as a leader to say, hey, we should build that thing, but you think people understand the why behind that thing, but actually they don't, and for some reason they don't ask, or at least if they do ask, you're not giving them enough context. In that case, that was very obvious why we were building that app. The goal was really clear to everyone and really, really, really motivating. So that's kind of the key thing as a leader, which is how do you make sure that that your team really understand what you're building matters, that they really feel empowered to do something about that. And I guess the other thing is, with this kind of strong pressure, as I said, you just get a lot more stuff, and you debate a lot less, and you do a lot more. And basically, that's also like a very important learning, which is do not over debate things. Do not try to think too much about what will work, what will not work. Just try something, see the reaction. If it's positive, great, keep investing. If it's not, just move on and try to do something else. So I think it's those kind of things, like it's almost like common knowledge, like you will read 22 times about it, and every time you read about it, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then actually very few people, I think, actually apply it, or I think I certainly was guilty to a large extent of not applying it enough. And it's really by resitting and having this experience where you actually see the impact that it has on a concrete team and a concrete project. They're like, yeah, we should definitely do more of that, and not just talk about it.
Yeah, of course. And have you spoken much with people in the health tech industry? Other companies who, I guess, is sort of more focused on health. There's some really prominent ones who haven't, or weren't able at least to get something out as quickly. Has there been a lot of conversation there around collaboration and just essentially just being a little bit more open with data and processes as well?
Yes and no, in the sense we as a company have been talking to a lot of people. The challenge that we have is a lot of people reach out to us and say, we'd like to help, but we don't necessarily have the right amount of bandwidth to actually set them up in a way that they can actually help us. So at a very small scale, one of the things we've been trying to do is open source the mobile app. So it's actually there on GitHub, accessible. We've not communicated about it. Making the source available is a very easy part. Managing the community, we're working with a few people, is a lot harder. Coming up with process where people can actually contribute to a code base is also very, very hard. So we had very similar conversation with quite a few companies that reach out to us, which is a lot of people have a lot of great ideas, but they don't necessarily have all of the context, which now suddenly you have this trade-off, which is do I spend several hours with them trying to come up with the context that will help them contribute in the right way. Do I want to do that not knowing how much time and effort they will eventually put into it? or do I just focus on the next most important thing for us that we know will have an impact right this second? And a big thing is that the scientists we're working with, they keep asking us more questions every day. There is always something more that they want to do. Do you do that, or do you work with this other company? For example, one company reached out to say, hey, we could do a version of your app that works over WhatsApp. That sounds like a great idea. You send a message, you send back some kind of a question, you say yes or no. That's a great idea. How does consenting work on that? Consent is a very important thing about our app, which is you give us the permission to collect that data. It's not obvious that you can do that on WhatsApp. So now, similarly, if you want to do that, you're going to have to spend days talking to lawyers and etc. about finding out the details. So that's a challenge that we have with collaboration with a lot of people, which is a lot of people have great ideas, but a lot of people don't necessarily have all the skills that we need to make it happen. So we actually need to do quite a lot ourselves. And yeah, we've not done enough of that, I think.
Sure. Yeah, and I was going to say, it's probably, I mean, if you could kind of ask for an experiment, I suppose, just to kind of have a shot at getting something out there, getting such, such a big sort of reach, I suppose, it's something that most CTOs, VPs, founders would love to get out there. And I guess, yeah, your scientists now, the research guys working with you probably want it every time, I guess, now, every time they ask for something. I suppose just kind of, looking ahead for your own kind of path, because I appreciate we're going to be wrapping up shortly. I know a few people have got commitments and stuff. What would you approach this differently, do you think, sort of 4 or 5 years ago, or even, prior to getting into leadership, in terms of some lessons that you've definitely learned that you'd have liked to have told yourself before?
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, it's every year I think about old project. I'm like, oh, I should have done that differently, and this is not different. It's very easy to, in hindsight, decide, we should have done X, Y, Z, or that choice was not the right one. So there are definitely things like that. I think one of the big thing that I and we as a company is that we certainly did not kind of anticipate enough what success would look like, in the sense that success was great, but also meant that we had to put on hold everything else, basically, which is very impactful, right, for a startup. So I'm guilty of that. Other people are guilty of that. Let's jump and try to solve that problem. Hold on. When weren't we supposed to build a product on the side? What do we do about that? So now we're stuck in this kind of middle ground where we can't really, we're not like fully in control anymore, because we have to keep supporting the COVID Symptom Tracker. None of us do regret that. I think if we had to do it, we would do it again. But I think we would be a lot more honest about what are the possible consequences. Which are the consequences if everything works, right? So in most likelihood, in any other situation, we would have tried that. We just have not worked in the same way. But it's still important to realize that it's a complex ecosystem. Everything you do has consequences, and in that case, quite drastic consequences, because basically building our core product is basically more or less on hold right now.
It's going to be a great story though as well. I think moving forwards with with any young company to be able to have, just a great story, when people come in, and I'm sure this is hopefully for you guys going to feel, some big growth, hopefully when things kind of settle down a little bit, which, fingers crossed from everyone is going to be quite soon. But I guess just on that, just as like a couple of kind of roundup questions. I mean, when I imagine you may approach sort of scaling your team slightly differently to, from the hedge fund, I guess. It's kind of a different potential audience you're going to reach out to. How do you think this will be able, you can use this as, a bit of an attractor, come and join this, really pretty awesome team that got this out? I mean, do you think that's something you can use moving forward as you continue to grow?
Yeah, I think totally. I think, even before the work that we did in COVID Symptom Tracker, I think one of the big appeal that we had as a small startup was it's quite easy to explain the mission, and a lot of people care. A lot of people care about nutrition. There's a lot of engineers that I've met in the last 6 months that were like, oh yeah, I've read all that stuff, and they know like 10 times more than I do. Like, they are the expert, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm impressive. So there's a lot of people who are just, very passionate about that stuff. And that's really something that help in terms of, kind of scaling the team and hiring. Like, when you don't have to convince too much that what you're doing is important. Certainly that's a big step forward, and certainly something that is a lot easier than in the finance industry, I find. And obviously, based on the COVID Symptom Tracker, I think you're exactly right, which is I think that gives us two very interesting things. So obviously, as you mentioned, there's, we're hoping that quite a few people will know about us, and hopefully that will help us kind of find very good engineers, but also data scientists and various people in the future. So that's going to be quite important, but also, I think it's quite important as a company to be able to show, we did that thing, and, hopefully at some point we're hoping that there will be some good return investment for us by having brands, but when we did it, we didn't know anything about that, right? We just did it because we thought it was important, and that's a very good value to have, right? It's just this desire to help others. I think that's also another way that we will be able to reach out to people, and that people will be interested in working with us because they will be able to see, oh yeah, you did that stuff, and it did matter. So thank you for having done it. Like we would love to work with other people like that. And the third thing is basically we did it in record time, and a lot of other people tried to do something like that and did not necessarily achieve it for plenty of reasons. I'm hoping that will be a good thing to have in terms of track record that say when you're joining a startup, it's very hard to assess how good the people in this company are. Basically the best you can do is look at their track record before, but when you're so small than we are, you cannot really judge what is out there right now. Like ZOE doesn't have a product, so you cannot really test the product and see if it's really, really good. So the only thing you can do is start looking at their LinkedIn profile and etc. In our case, people will be able to see, yes, we did, make that thing happen. So hopefully that will be another way where we can benefit and build like a small, very small brand around the engineering data science team and the whole company in general.
Yeah, of course. No, I'm sure it's been a great kind of learning curve for everyone involved, and and the founders. And to be fair, just for I guess the public and the audience who've been watching it, because it's been I hate saying the word unprecedented, but it was. So it's been. There's been nothing else like this globally, of course, and I think so many people have been, I think, just kind of inspired about what you've built, and being able to actually help people, and a host of other companies, of course. There are some other great businesses that have put some really, really amazing stuff out there to help people, and I think we're really kind of seeing the good from this to everyone. So just I guess as kind of a parting bit of advice, as I said, the podcasts, and obviously the YouTube channels, there are so many people who wanted to listen to this live, but just didn't really have the chance because of commitments. But, if you have advice for, leaders of technology businesses, engineering companies, obviously you've got a great founding and leadership team, which you work closely with, for people who are experiencing a bit of a tough time now, from a business perspective as well, because everyone has their own personal struggles. Myself, I've got two pretty demanding young children. I'm lucky that I've got a very kind of understanding wife, but for just some advice and stuff you can put out to people who may be listening that maybe going through a hard time and need maybe a bit of a nudge in the right direction, to help people get through this, taking out business problems. If the business is really struggling, there's not a huge amount they can do. But if you've got some kind of parting advice that people in a similar position to yourself could maybe use.
I think, I'm not sure if I'm qualified for that, but I guess, the thing, again, that helped us go through the kind of COVID crisis, was really this kind of rallying cry where everybody kind of started working on one thing. And I think before we started working the COVID Symptom Tracker, as I said, we were all a bit kind of depressed. Everybody was working on this thing. Things were not really working very well. I mean, we're adapting reasonably well considering the situation. But I think from a business perspective, having this very, very clear goal and just trying to run as quickly as we could kind of meant that everybody kind of relied behind that idea, and then suddenly everybody stopped thinking too much about about how bad it was out there. So I think that's one of the things that we did that was quite good. And at the same time, I think as a company, we've been like super flexible with everybody, like recognizing that this is just not normal time. Obviously take care of your kids if you have to. Just do what matters for you. It's not normal times. We cannot expect you to be there 9 to 5. So really try to kind of over communicate with everybody, try to reassure everybody that we would go through that all together. Obviously, some companies are in the financial distress. We're not. So we really try to make sure people knew that and that we would all grow together one way or another, and ultimately. For us, one way we think about it, I mean, we don't know if we will be successful in the future, but a lot of great companies have been built in economic downturns. Actually, some of the best. So that's what we're trying to do. Basically, is force you to focus, force you to really spend times on what matters and not all the small thing on the side. So I think that's kind of my advice. If your business is not going well, make sure you spend your time on the right thing and not thinking too much about all the small stuff that maybe you had in mind and you wanted to improve, but actually may not be that important anymore.
Yeah, sure. And I think, it really resonates true with I think myself and Tom and probably a whole other range of people. I mean, we gathered and found up, like 6 or 7 days or something before lockdown. So, for us straight away from day one, it was a completely different shift. We went from our kind of primary objective, I guess, which was just really trying to partner, first and foremost with some amazing businesses to actually, right, okay, we need to really take stock here because people, they don't want to be like have a pitch, I guess, from talent partners and stuff like that. We quickly changed our focus that, we're literally just here to support people, any advice that you need. Obviously the market has been, pretty busy and active with candidates who have been, at risk and what have you. But, little things like even getting this podcast out. We spoke really early before we even set the business up that we wanted to get a podcast out there because no other businesses are really doing it. And we've got such a great network, I guess, in the space that, we can reach so many different people across Europe, the Americas as well, and globally, that it's allowed us to do this. And, we may not have kind of been able to do it. And look, we're definitely not building an app that gets 2.5 million downloads. However, I think, just with everyone's different situation at the moment, just trying to get as much content like this out into the market, as a platform that people can use and, really sort of take some advice from, I think is going to be, really, really valuable. So, I'll keep it ticking over once we get the sort of recording finished. But I guess just to kind of wrap up, Julien, I was going to say, I definitely don't say your name with justice in my English accent, but I really, really appreciate your time. It's been great to hear about the story, about the journey, and I think loads of people are going to be really watching your story with some great interest moving forward. So just again to everyone listening, continue to kind of subscribe. Watch on the YouTube platform and channel. Tom and I only have Faces for Radio normally, so if you do want to watch us, it's on YouTube. But just as a thank you, we really, really appreciate it, and thanks for your time. It was great to have you.
Thank you very much for having me. It was great talking to you guys today.
Cheers. Thank you. Cheers, Julien.